Okay, so we're going to talk about task 3. So I need everybody to get out their template if you don't have it out in front of you already, and understanding rubric progressions, because we're going to talk about rubrics 11 through 15. Okay. So this is your assessment commentary. Now I'm going to reiterate, it doesn't matter what subject area you're in, it is one assessment, just one. It can be formative or summative, as long as you have an evaluation criteria to be able to talk to with your strengths and your weaknesses and your patterns of learning. Okay? So is everybody clear on that? One, it has to look like the same exact assessment. So if you've modified the assessment, it still has to look the same, or the scorer will send it back that says, this is not the same assessment, and it will be unscorable for task 3, which you don't want, all right? Okay, so in task 1, you planned assessments across your learning segment. So you should have anywhere from 3 to 5 assessments, both formative and summative, or it can be all formative. It should not be all summative. And then you're going to choose one that gives you the most feedback on strengths and weaknesses. Okay? If you talk about just their weaknesses, you're not giving the children anything to build off of. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so you're going to have to decide which assessment you're going to use, and only you can do that. And then which one is going to give you the most feedback to the student, or which is going to give you the most evidence that they either mastered, partially mastered, or non-mastered the skill or concept, okay? So you're going to decide which assessment, and it must be completed by the whole class. Now, however, many times you may have an assessment where you have a student that's absent. That's okay. If you choose that assessment and you do not get the child to make that assessment up, just on the chart, you either don't put their name on there or you just put absent. It's not going to affect you either way, all right? Okay, so part D of the assessment commentary is going to be your evaluation criteria. That means how you're going to grade it. So if you are grading, like my middle school people, my secondary people are grading 93 to 100 as an A, 86 to 92 as a B, so forth and so on, you're clearly going to put that on a Word document, save it as Part D dash evaluation criteria, save. That just tells the scorer how you scored it. If you are using a rubric, same thing. You copy and paste that rubric, save it as Part D evaluation criteria. It's helpful if you put a title at the top of that rubric for what it went with. Okay, and save it. Now I'm going to remind you that all documents, even if they're done in Word, must be saved in PDF in order to upload to Pearson. Okay, you cannot upload a Word document. I know that it says you can, but it really literally has taken 2 hours. You really want to save everything in PDF, so save it in Word and then save it in PDF. And then you're going to upload using your PDF files. Everything except for your video clip, okay? All right, so you're going to collect and analyze your student work to identify patterns within and across the learners in your class. So here's what's going to happen, all right? On your assessment commentary, what does 1A say?
Identify the specific learning objectives measured by the assessment you choose for analysis.
Okay, identify the specific learning objectives. That's across all of my programs, right? Elementary literacy, elementary math, and my middle school people? Yes. Okay, that means just for that assessment. So you're only using the objectives that you wrote on your lesson plans from task 1 that goes along with that assessment. So I would go to my lesson plan and copy my objectives from whatever day that is and paste it right there. However, I would give a small explanation for what skills and concepts that assessment is assessing and how you are evaluating it. So what does that mean? That means that you're going to explain what you're looking at as far as finding out what they know. For example, Badron is talking about doing sequencing of events, and let's just say for the New Deal, but he's looking at whether they know how to pull out the events out of a passage and then sequencing them in proper order. That would be an assessment. So he's going to talk about what the skill is he's wanting them to do And then he's going to talk about how he's going to evaluate that, meaning grade it. Okay? If you are in kindergarten, it does not necessarily have to be a numerical grade. It can easily be a smiley face, straight face, sad face, as long as you know what that means, because in Part D, you're going to explain to the scorer what each of those mean. So if you give them a smiley face and you have 10 questions, then they make 80% or 70%, 7 out of 10 they get a smiley face. 4 to 6 they get a straight face. Below 6 they get a sad face. Just explaining to the scorer what each criteria is. Or you can use the plus and minus system. If you're in kindergarten, first, second grade, it's really, to be honest with you, especially at some of our other schools, you have there are no grades. It's just whether they meet the benchmarks, whether there's exceeds expectations, meets expectations. If you want to use that, Kira, if you want to use that grading, perfectly fine. Just explain to the scorer. ES means exceeds expectations, and this is how many they had to get correct in order to get an ES. Meets expectations, no problem. MS, how many, what they had to get right in order to get that. If there is, and a lot of times at some of our schools, there is an ES, what they call ES challenge, where 1 or 2 of the questions on that assessment gives them the ES. You need to explain that on your evaluation criteria, which numbers those were, and if they got them correctly, then they got an ES on that challenge. Make sense? Any questions? Okay, so we're going to talk about selecting your work samples. So on your one assessment, you're going to create under, I believe it's 1B. Does it ask for the chart in 1B and or a narrative? Okay, so we're going to do both, and let me explain why. So on 1B, when it talks about a chart, you can do it in a multitude of ways, and you can have more than one chart. So that's why whenever they give you a 10-page page limit, you may need that because you decide that you want to do a bar graph to show the patterns, and then you want to do a chart, like a table, color-coded. Okay? See it all the time. That's not a problem at all. But what you're going to do is you're going to put every child's first name, unless they have a similar, like for example, if I have 2 Hannahs, I would put Hannah S and Hannah E, not their full name. Okay? And or you could put student A through Z, however you decide to do it. But first names are okay. Just as in task 2, if you call them by their first name, that's okay. Okay? Or if they had the same name on your video and you had to call them, it's really, some of those things we just can't catch. We can't take care of that, okay? So you'll put it on there, and then across the top of your chart, you're going to put your criteria. Whether you want to put, mastery, partial mastery, non-mastery, or you want to put what your rubric categories were, or you want to put, 8 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, however you decide to do that. But then you're going to want to go in and color code it to make it stand out for the scorer that you have differences in learning, which is what's going to point out for your patterns of learning. Now, underneath that chart, you're going to write a paragraph, and it needs to be somewhat lengthy, guys, where you discuss both quantitatively, numerically, and qualitatively skills and concepts that they had strengths on as a class, skills and concepts that they had weaknesses on as a class. And you want to talk about the patterns of learning and the differences. So for example, 11 out of my 21 mastered the skill of sequencing of events. However, 9 out of my 21 were not able to pull them out of the passage by themselves. Okay, and you talk about what those skills might have given them trouble with. All right, so you want to give a number like 20 out of 21 mastered, or 19 out of 21 mastered, and this is what they mastered. But then again, I had some of these partial masteries, and then again, this is what I had with some of my non-masteries. Okay, an example of that would be. Here's a chart I can show you an example of, but it says procedures, fractions, and numbers, and it gives the questions in which they related to. Okay? And you see they just got pluses and minuses, and that's okay. But there's also a numerical value of they got 4 pluses, therefore they have 100%. And under it, it says, in accordance to figure A, which summarizes student learning for my whole class, and that's bolded, majority of the students have shown mastery. More specifically, 73% averaged from all 4 evaluation criteria of the students have shown mastery in the learning objectives. The evaluation criteria has been formulated from the standards and learning objectives addressed in this lesson, including procedural fluency of multiplying fractions, mixed numbers, and whole number by fractions, solving word problems, using multiplying fractions, reducing fractions into lowest terms, and converting improper fractions into mixed numbers. According to the assessment gathered from questions 1 through 4, 100%, 13 out of 13 students demonstrated procedural fluency by correctly solving multiplying fractions, mixed numbers, and whole numbers by a fraction. All the students followed the correct multiplying fractions procedure taught during lessons 1, 2, and 3 to obtain their answers. According to the assessments gathered from questions 5 through 7, 77% of my students, 10 out of 13, demonstrated conceptual understanding and problem-solving skills by correctly solving word problems. These students either drew an illustration or constructed a single-step mathematical equation of multiplying fractions to correctly solve the problem, as evident in student 1 and 2 work samples, questions 5 through 7. Does that give you an example of what you need to do for the narrative underneath it? Okay? Then she put, according to figure A, my underperforming students also demonstrated 100% mastery. This mastery clearly demonstrated by the swoops drawn from the numerator to numerator and denominator to denominator to solve problems 1 through 4 in student 3 work sample. About half of my underperforming students demonstrated mastery for word problems 5 through 7. Those who got the right solution either drew an illustration or constructed single-step mathematical equation by multiplying fractions. Those who did not get it right failed to do so, as shown in student 3 work sample question 6. And she just talks about what they struggled with. All right, that's the narrative that goes underneath that paragraph. Are there any questions on that? If you want to, on 1 where it talks about identify the specific learning objective or standards, you can include the standard that goes along with that if you'd like to. And basically the little narrative that goes under that basically just talks about where the assessment, what it aligns to, if you want to talk about aligning to Common Core standards, or you want to talk about aligning to your state standards, etc. But be careful and make sure that you don't allude to the fact that it's Tennessee state standards or TN ready standards, okay?
Just put state standards?
I just put state standards, right. Now, if you have your, like for example, on this one, it's got just like SPI and it lists it. Or if it has, if it's 10 ready standards, you want to make sure that you can list it, because that's just the way that that's the domain that it's called from. Okay? All right. So is everybody clear about the chart and what goes underneath that chart? Yes.
This kind of pertains to it. Can you include the child's name on their assessment, or does it need to be blocked out?
Great question. Everybody hear that? Mm-hmm. Can you include the child's name on the assessment? It needs to be marked out in black marker. Okay? You have to mark out their names. It has to be non-identifying.
So on, like, after you make a copy, after you've done the after you've given the feedback, then on the copy it includes...
That's correct. So what her question is once you've given the feedback on the assessment, go ahead and make a copy of the assessment if you're going to use it for one of your focus students, and then just black out their name and scan it in. Okay? All right. The next question or prompt is on 1C of the assessment commentary. It talks about using evidence found in the 3 work samples and the whole class summary to analyze patterns of learning for the whole class and differences in groups. So it's asking you to address whole class first and then your 3 focus students. Okay? Is everybody clear on that? So on your patterns of learning, it may be some of what you said in the paragraph before that in 1B, talking about strengths and weaknesses, mastery and non-mastery and partial mastery, skills that they really grasped and skills that they did not. Okay? However, you also want to discuss your specific students, strengths and weaknesses. It is okay to list that. By the way, one of them must be on your chart. If you have any children on your chart in Context for Learning, one of them that is a focus student must be on that chart. All right, everybody clear on that? So you want to make sure that when you're addressing it, that you are, by the way, this is the chart for the whole class is going to be rubric 11, okay? And then your,
So,
go ahead.
I have
No,
a
go ahead.
question. If students have a choice of what a project should do, like, can you list that they had a choice to do this, this, and this, or this? Or do they all have to have the same project?
Yeah, it's going to have to, well, it is cleaner if they all have the same project choice. So if you gave them choices, it is cleaner and less likely to get coded if you use the same assessment to where when the score is looking at evidence of feedback and work samples, it is the same exact one all the way through. Okay? Great question though. All right, so rubric 11 is about your whole class and your patterns of learning. Rubric 12 is going to be about your, I believe it's about feedback, about giving the students feedback. And then 13 is how they applied the feedback. 14 is on academic language and their opportunities to utilize academic language. And let me tell you this, it's not just on this assessment. It is every opportunity that they had an opportunity to use the academic language. So whatever your language function was, describe, explain, compare, contrast, order, summarize, analyze, whatever it is, you need to talk about everywhere they did that, and use of vocabulary, both oral and written, and your language demands. Okay, that's rubric 14. Yep. And then, so let's kind of go through this. So when you're looking at your 3 focus students, because it's asking, for example, in math, it's asking for conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and math problem solving and reasoning. You must address all of them on that one assessment. On that one assessment. Okay? So when you're choosing your assessment, if yours is like, for example, essential literacy strategies and related skills, it needs to be those off of that assessment. Okay, that's another big key. Science, what does yours say, Misty? What does yours say specifically on your criteria for like your whole class and then your 3?
Which one would that be?
It's going to be 1C probably with yours. If you'll get back to me on that, that would be great. All right, so while she's 1C. Mm-hmm.
It says use evidence found in 3 student work samples and the whole class summary to analyze the patterns of learning for the whole class and differences for groups or individual learners relative to conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and mathematical reasoning or problem-solving skills.
That shouldn't be yours though, because yours is science. Is yours saying that too?
But I think maybe, but you gave me elementary mathematics before.
I mean, this is the one you gave me for science.
I need to look at that because that's not the right one.
Yeah, I have elementary mathematics.
Yeah, that's not the right one.
It says elementary mathematics. Never mind.
Yeah, I'll get it. It's in that email that I sent y'all all that out. Okay, I need to fix that. Yours is also elementary math assessment commentary. And then will you check yours too, please then? All right, so I'll get that to you all. On 2A, it says, in what form did you submit your evidence of feedback for your focus students? Written directly on your work samples. And all you have to say is a simple sentence. I wrote it directly on my work samples. Okay? However, if you are kindergarten and you wrote a transcript out, just put, I wrote a transcript and attached it and orally went over it with my students. If you are orally going over it with them, in addition to writing it on there, you want to make sure that you list that. All right? Under 2B, explain how feedback provided to the 3 focus students address their individual strengths and needs relative to the standards and objectives measured. This is going to be 3 separate paragraphs, one for each student. And you're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses, both.